Hello and welcome. This is Business Edge right here on News Central. I'm Tolulope Adele Balogun. And on the show today, a quick look at our headlines. Nigeria, West African neighbors meet to address border closure. And we also take a look at the future of agriculture in Nigeria. We'll take a quick break right after this. Stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. Now on Business Edge, we'll be taking a look at the border closure and how it has impacted business around the West African region, particularly looking at agriculture. But before we get into the background of our stories today, I have a few guests in the studio with me. Let me introduce the national president of NASIMA, and that is Hajia Siratu Aliyu. Hajia, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And also joining her, we have the chairman, Agricultural Trade Group for NASIMA, Ade Adefeko, also joining us. Ade, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so a quick background. Now, Nigeria and its West African neighbors have met to address the border closure. Nigeria's Information Minister Lai Mohammed has shared that the country's import duty collection grew by 15% since its border closure to neighboring countries 3 months ago, noting that the number of weapons smuggled into the country has also reduced. Nigeria met with its West African neighbors this week to address its land border closure. According to Mohammed, no agreement has been reached, but ECOWAS protocol on transit goods must be adhered to. In spite of a spike in import duty collection, Mohammed added that standard protocol on duty payment for transit goods has not been followed to the detriment of local manufacturers. The Nigerian government is putting in place checks to ensure that its economy will not be overrun as a result of a free trade agreement it signed this year, and plans to keep its land borders closed until at least January. So let's get into this conversation and some of the ramifications for those who are involved in the export business and agriculture, and of course those who may be moving goods between Nigeria and some of the countries affected. Hajia, let me start with you. So we do hear from the federal government through the Minister of Information that there has been a spike. There's been an increase in the collection duty that they've been able to bring in. And we've also heard the head of customs also say this as well, that they've made a bit more money in regards to this. But doesn't this point to the fact that for a number of years, customs that has been responsible for what moves in and out of the borders has not effectively been living up to their job?
Well, I don't think we can say that customs have not been living up to their jobs. We have a lot of problems surrounding that. There has been an agreement between Nigeria and its West African neighbors on how goods should be transported into our country. Mm-hmm. But this agreement has not been followed to the latter. We all know that most of our goods come in through Cotonou and other ports like that. The other people on the other side collect their own duties and everything, and instead of them to follow those goods to the Nigerian border and deposit them with our own Nigerian customs, they just allow the goods to filter into the country without any control. So that has been the case for all these years. Okay. And they all know it and did not comply with it. That is why the president now took that step that it should be controlled.
Mm-hmm. Now let me ask, as an organization, the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA, are they in favor of this particular border closure?
Yes, of course we are. I know our members are suffering, but that suffering is going to be for the good of all of us at the end of the day, because by the time everything is put in place and the correct tariff is being deducted from what is coming in, and the government is getting its own fair share of what is supposed to collect from what is coming in and going out, they will have a lot to use to improve on some of our infrastructure and other things like that. I know the government still has a lot to do to help in seeing that we have a lot to gain from what is happening now.
Okay, Ade, let me ask you. Okay, we're getting to that.
I just wanted to speak to it.
Okay, so Haji has mentioned that some of the members of NASIMA have suffered in the past few months. What are some of the challenges that members of your organization have faced in the last 3 months there is that the border has been closed? And what are some of the things, the expectations from government in regards to sort of ameliorating that situation for them?
Thank you. You know that NASIMA has members who are exporters and importers as alike. What is important and what has been stated by the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Information, is to the effect that 15% more revenues have come in. And that is, let me give you an example with rice. I'm the largest, one of the member companies, I don't want to mention companies there because we're talking about the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
We're the largest producer of rice. But 2.5 million tons of rice get smuggled into the country every year. So you can imagine.
So that affects the output and the production and the profitability.
So what happens is that Nigeria consumes 7 million tons of rice. 2.5 million
is smuggled in.
We produce about 3.5 or 4 million. By the time you input that 2.5 million in, which are counting as local production, it's erroneous because it's coming in as smuggled. No tariffs are paid. But why don't you allow these things to come in legitimately and tariffs are paid? So what Nigeria needs to do is to allow rice to come in legitimately, let people pay tariffs and levies, and government gets its revenue. But right now, what happens is that prior to the borders being closed about 3 months ago, which I think is a very positive development, but like Haja said, some members are suffering because of imports and other things you have at the borders. Yeah. But there are 3 things being involved here. You have proliferation of arms, you have smuggled rice, smuggled poultry products. Everything in Nigeria seems to be smuggled in. The Beninoas don't eat parboiled rice. But the parboiled rice that comes from Thailand comes through their ports and ends up in Lagos. Whether at night, whether during the broad daylight, we don't know. But it comes in. And that undermines local production.
So in terms of this local production, you work directly with those who are, as you said earlier, importers and exporters of whatever it is that we can produce here in Nigeria. Beyond this, the question also has to be, why has it just been now that the federal government has taken such a hardline stance? This is not an issue of yesterday. It's not an issue of the President Muhammadu Buhari administration. It's something that many people have been aware that's been going on for a number of years. So why the stance now?
I agree with you, but you have to take the bull by the horn. The President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration has said to itself, you know what, we'll bite the bullet. We have to take this hard stance. There will be temporary suffering, but long term will be better for it. And I think in the last 2-3 months, we're better for it. You find out that heads of states of countries that neighbor us come in every, technically speaking, to come and confer with our president, saying please, in the spirit of free movement. And the president has said no. And the customs head honcho has said no. And the National Security Advisor, of course, manages security. So you find out that proliferation of arms as well is a problem. So a lot of things get smuggled in. We've become a country of anything goes. So this government, I think, has taken a step in the right direction.
Okay. Now, Hajia, let me ask you. So the ECOWAS protocol has been mentioned in this, but many people are also projecting ahead to January, when the African Continental Free Trade Agreements will come into being. And we haven't really heard too much on particularly when specifically borders will be open. When we heard from Hamid Ali, it will continue until Nigeria is satisfied. Now a bit of hearing maybe January. Does this put AFTA into question for Nigeria's participation if our borders remain closed until January?
Oh, no, I don't think it puts anything in question, because we already have seen a letter that was duly signed and stamped that by the 31st of January, the borders will be open again. I think I saw that somewhere and I have seen people talk about it. After, so many people didn't want us to sign this thing. But I just thought, even that time, I said, if there's something that is happening for the whole of Africa and they want us to come together, if we do not sign, we do not participate, how do we get to know how to repair our own house, how to get our arts right, so that when we start this trade, Nigeria will not become a dumping ground? We have to be there, we have to know, we have to learn. So now NASIMA, since the signing of this AFTA, we have been conducting seminars. We've had it in series. We had it in the 3rd series took place a few months ago. I think before the end of the year, we are going to have one more series for the AFTA. Our people have to be educated. We have to know. We have to put our infrastructure in place. There is a lot that Nigeria has to do. But if we are not participating, how do we know that we need to do all these things before it starts?
Okay.
As an addendum to what she
Yes.
said, we have 1.2 billion people. We have 54 countries, or 55 because we have Southern Sudan, and in between that. And you ask yourself, if you don't have a seat at the table, how do you want to have to discuss?
You become a meal on the table.
Exactly. And you know what will now happen is that they will shave your head in your absence.
Yes.
And when your head is shaved in your absence, do you have a stake?
And one of the things many people have worried about, have been worried about, is the fact that Nigeria seems to be a priority for many people.
Yes.
We are a premium market that many may be targeting.
Premium market because we are 200 million people. Out of the 1.2 billion people, 54 nations. And again, when you sign that treaty, there's what you call domestication and ratification.
Yes.
So when you get to that bridge, you can now say, based on the domestication and ratification, I want to domesticate this, I want to ratify that.
Okay.
So it's important for us to have that, to be a member of that congregation, as it were. And from there, start discussing. But you are not a member of the congregation, and you are talking from outside. They'll tell you, you didn't come in, you are outside.
You have to abide by the rules that they make.
Precisely.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll continue this conversation and also look at inflation numbers that have come in for Nigeria and get more into detail about the future of agriculture in Nigeria. I have guests from Nasima joining me right here on Business Edge. Do stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us, and this is still Business Edge right here on News Central. Continuation of our earlier conversation, now really drilling down more into agriculture in Nigeria and some of the effects of the border closure. Joining me now, I have Deputy President for Nasima, Dele Kelvin Oye. Welcome to the show. And of course, the Chairman, Agricultural Trade Group of Nasima, Ade Adefeko, is still with us right now. So let's get back into the conversation. And there's something Hajia said that I quickly wanted us to touch base on. And she talked about the fact that Nasima has been holding a series of meetings with some of the members, importers, exporters, those involved in trade, as AFTA approaches. And AFTA has been a very big deal for many people on the continent. So what are some of the things that Nasima has done? What exactly does the series do for those who are involved in Nasima and who are looking to import and export when AFTA fully comes on board?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity. Well, like you know, Nasima was the first, or one of the first organizations to support signing of the AFTA. And what we've tried to do specifically is to encourage our members to increase their capacity, because also be more efficient the way they produce or cultivate any of their processes, because we're going to be out there with more competing with several other persons. So basically, what we are doing now is to help them to build capacity.
Okay.
And these are one of the reasons why we have organized trainings, and not just only in Nigeria, but within the West African sub-region, by bringing all the CEOs of all the chambers of commerce under one roof to train them so that they can help and support the business of their members. And we also have a huge collaboration with Olam as one of our partners in this sector. So we're really doing everything to help encourage them to deploy new technology, be more efficient the way they produce, and most importantly, engage the right kind of technology so that the mix of all that will make them more competitive.
Ade, I want to bring you in here. He talks about competitiveness, more productivity, technology as well. For many years, there's been conversations around food safety and food security, Nigeria being food sufficient as well. And a number of people with this border closure have talked about the fact that the country is not food sufficient, which is why we have such a large import bill. So how is Nasima, and of course, with some of the other knowledge you have, with what I might call your side hustle, how is Nasima working on those things? Because when we talk about food sufficiency and food security, they're not necessarily the same thing.
Yes.
So we need to make that very clear for people, and we need to see how we're encouraging our farmers to make the country food sufficient.
Like Dele said, in Nasima we take agriculture seriously, we take mining very seriously, we take industry very seriously. We're the foremost chamber in the country that is all encompassing. So for us, we'll go across, various sectors, but drilling down and narrowing down to agriculture. For us, agriculture is not. We don't talk about agriculture anymore now, we talk about agribusiness. Because agriculture is now a business.
Yeah.
It's not subsistence farming that we used to do.
It's not hoe and cutlass.
No, not at all. It's not mechanization. It's not irrigation. Yes, the entire value chain. From what you call seed to shelf, or from farm to fork. So for us in Nigeria, we're number one in cassava. You have to import starch. We are good in maize, soya, and the likes. But the problem with us is that our yields are very poor. And our yields are poor because our extension workers we had in the 70s and 80s have not been. He talked about capacity building. He's very, very right. Capacity building is very important. You have to retool, you have to retrain. Because these guys are talking about 30, 40 years ago of analogous technology. We're talking about digital technology now. We're talking about the future. We're talking about artificial intelligence. The world has moved. The train has left the station. Yeah. So we might have another chance to get into the train. But right now, we're not there yet. Nigeria is the largest producer of yam, largest producer of cocoa yam. Where, unarguably, we're not doing very bad in other areas. But you know what? For you to be competitive, you must have competitive advantage in something. So people always talk about competitiveness. You can only be competitive when you have competitive advantage. But Nigeria always tends to want to have competitive advantage in so many things. Choose some crops. You can call them, tier A crops that you want to focus on. You can't focus on everything. And Dele and I were having a conversation offset. You can't have a 10-point agenda. You can only have 2 points, 3 points, so that you can be able to do something for focus. Yeah. Because we do tend to do a lot of things in Nigeria based on electoral cycles of 4 years or max 8 years. We need to shift from that. And that's what the chamber is doing. I don't think the national president told you. She's the president of the Federation of West African Chambers of Commerce. And in that capacity was where we're coming from. Dele, you might want to speak to that quickly. Where we're coming from with respect to today, prior to coming now. Okay. Talking about the competitiveness.
Okay. Well, just to add up to what Adhired just said, certainly our president, or Nasima today, is heading 3 very important positions. One, Nasima is the chairman of the organized private sector, position we are holding for 2 years. And incidentally also, our president is also president of Federation of West African Chambers of Commerce. That is all the 15 West African states, inclusive of Mauritania. And what we've tried to do in the area of competitiveness and capacity building is to encourage our members, because we just finished a program now sponsored by the EU, where we had all the CEOs of those chambers of commerce in one room the last 3-4 days, where with Paris Chamber of Commerce, Birmingham Chamber of Commerce, and Mauritius has done very well. We also brought them in as part of the case study, where they are showing how to be relevant to your members, be able to scope them and put them in a proper setting where they can also see the chamber as a central figure.
Okay, talking about being useful and advantageous to your members, I'd also have to ask about policy. How effective has Nasima also been in either having conversations with governments, maybe not just Nigeria, but across the West African region, but also being able to drive policy that puts agriculture at the forefront, but making it based on technology, mechanization, making sure that you push a policy, you push a drive that would be beneficial to those who are in agribusiness across the West African region?
Dele, I want to speak to the visit we made to the president.
And we have to be fast.
Let me just be honest with you. We all realize that every business has a major baseline. That is the law and the policy which the government sets.
Yeah.
In the inauguration, after the inauguration of Hajia, within the first 1 month, we paid a courtesy call at the highest level of government to meet Mr. President. And in fact, in that visit, the president congratulated us for being the first organization in Nigeria to ask that we sign the AfCFTA agreement. Apart from that, we also give the government 16-point agenda, which we tend to engage government. And one of them is agribusiness and agriculture. And Olam, Adhierd being our chairman of agri, it's a deliberate policy because we've realized the size and they're a big player in that industry.
Okay,
and they're also in a position to influence policy. And we needed to rely on their expertise.
Yes. Okay, I'll wrap this up with you because we are out of time. So Nasima is working deliberately with government. He's talked about a 16-point agenda. He's also talked about putting the CEOs of all the chambers in one room and having some kind of policy. We have environmental issues coming up. We have a lack of capacity across the continent. Food security, food sufficiency issues spread across the continent. In terms of the West African region, how do we intend with Nasima? How does Nasima intend to make sure we rise above those issues?
What we have decided in Nasima is to say that Nigeria, being in quotes the giant of Africa, will not lord itself over anybody, which is why we play an all-inclusive role in which we bring chambers. I mean, we hosted, so we brought the chambers to us. And these chambers, I mean, we have the Cape Verde. Cape Verde is very strong. Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau are very strong in bananas. So in Africa we have Lusophone, Francophone, Anglophone, and of course the only Spanish-speaking country, Equatorial Guinea. So for us, we make sure that we have a deliberate policy of inclusivity. What we preach is inclusive prosperity, prosperity for all, and making sure that in that prosperity for all, the national food security architecture of every nation is all-encompassing.
Okay. Okay, we'll wrap it up there, and I have to say a very big thank you to my guests from NASIMA today. Earlier, we had the national president of NASIMA, Hajia Saratu Aliyu. Now wrapping things up with me on set, I have deputy president for NASIMA, Dele Kelvin Oye, and also the chairman, agricultural trade group for NASIMA, Ade Adefeko. Gentlemen, and of course, ladies, she's no longer with us. Thank you so much for joining me.
Very good. Thank you for having us.
All right, we'll wrap things up, and I'll quickly run through NC4 to watch as we get to the next thing on News Central. Border closure contributing to rising inflation, says Nigeria's finance minister. Moving on, Jambo jet delays Somalia's entry, launches Rwanda flight. Number 3, Kenya's Centum's first half pre-tax profit soars. Some good news there. And finally, South Africa's Vodacom CFO to step down, leaving the company after 23 years. Thank you for joining us right here on News Central. Business Eds will come your way again throughout the course of the day and, of course, into the next. Stay with us, and you can, of course, check us out throughout the day. And stay right here. Business-wise, financially savvy conversations every day on Business Edge. I'm Tolu Lokwe Adeleru Balogun.